Welcome everybody, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. We are on the lands of the Kwakwaka'wakw, and Kwakwaka'wakw First Nations, and I encourage all of us to kind of take some time to actually think about what that means. I realized there was a really big kind of information gap between us and our partners. So the forest industry, DFO, Coast Guard, BC Parks, really any provincial staff, community members, just everyday people who live and work in this area, understanding cultural information about our backgrounds, about understanding one another just as human beings.
If we want to build real relationships that support individuals and communities in the Indigenous space, be prepared to invest time in those relationships and in yourself in being ready to do that work.
I think it's really important, not just for my organizations, but all organizations, to really get a strong understanding of where our First Nation partners come from. And particularly in the South Central Coast, we work a lot with Guardian programs. For me as a First Nations person and as a BC Parks Senior Ranger, it's important for me to know a bit about where their history comes from, as well as how our partnerships can evolve.
The importance of having different relationships and partnerships, collaborative efforts with all the different agencies that have a similar responsibility is also a critical component to the success of the work of the Guardian Watchman programs. It's also very important that these other partners, collaborators, have a good understanding of the culture, of the history of the territory that they're working in.
The purpose of this workshop is to give people a better understanding of how to work with First Nations communities, how to build meaningful, productive relationships with those communities, specifically the Kwakwaka'wakw Guardians, but also at the same time help them understand the cultural connection that First Nations people in BC, and specifically the Kwakwaka'wakw, have with land. We are from the land, we are of the land, we are part of the land. And that's how we've always seen ourselves, as part of that ongoing, changing circle of life. And within that circle, we have obligations and responsibilities to the land and the people around us. How that affects the historical context in which we are currently trying to address in all of our relationships at all times.
The Guardians, not only are they out there protecting, but they're also building their relationship with that land, and therefore building a relationship with our culture. They are physically connected to this land by the way that they're patrolling, by the way that they're gaining that cultural understanding. They are a bridge back to that very, very intimate knowledge of where we live. And that's the heart of who we are and where everything comes from.
It's our way of life. We were the guardians of the land, the water, and resources. It's important for them to learn that the plants and the resources are very important, because everything grows by the water, bogs, lakes, and on the land.
And we took care of our resources in a reciprocal way, where we could take from them, but we would also give to them, and that cycle would continue on and on.
I think it's really important for all non-First Nation organizations to participate in this type of workshops. It gives people a strong foundation of where First Nations have come from and where First Nations are going.
For people who haven't had an opportunity to understand our First Nations and work with the First Nations, it's a time to understand openly, ask questions. I think it's a good opportunity to grow.
If we all put our heads together and we all make those small changes in our places, our spaces, it will have an overall impact.
Understanding what First Nations are bringing to us back and what's being brought back on the landscape and the partnerships we can build.
At the end of the workshop, people were walking away moved, right? They were walking away with a shifted perspective. The effect is to create a deeper connection between people, including, partners of Indigenous nations and Indigenous community members.
I really hope that people take this workshop, specifically if they work in natural resources, because they will learn how to create more productive and meaningful relationships with local First Nation. I just really wanted to thank everybody, appreciate you taking the time and the energy and to actively listen.